Before we can understand the importance of the term setting, we must first understand what setting is. To put it in as simpler terms as possible, for the purpose of your story, setting is both place and time. In other words, it is the place where your story happens and the time from whence it occurs. For example, if you were going to write a story about the first time you hosted the family Thanksgiving dinner back in 2021, the place would be inside your house and the time Thanksgiving 2021. Place and time. Two very important aspects of setting. Time for another of my little tales.
Why did you let him kill me?
A man who was dying from an incurable disease needed to pass the control of his thriving business onto one of his children. But he had a problem. His first problem was that he didn't have a son to leave his business to, and although he had three very capable daughters who could easily take control, it was forbidden for an unwed woman to assume the position of ownership of any business. For the past year, he had tried his best to marry them off and would give ownership of the business to the one who married first. The problem was, of his daughters, two complained about any and everything. They were the two biggest complainers anyone had ever seen, and whenever their father found a suitable suitor for either of them, their incessant complaining eventually drove the young man away. The third daughter also had difficulty in obtaining a husband, but not for the same reason as her older sisters. Her affliction, from no fault of her own, was due to the fact that she was born a mute, and because she was seen as handicapped, no eligible bachelor wanted to be married to her. Then one day a young man from a poor family asked to meet the dying man's daughters. Normally, he wouldn't have consented to such a low standing person, but since no other man would accept any of his daughters, he agreed to allow the poor man to marry whichever one of his daughters that he liked. He was an honest man, so he told the young man that his daughters complained more than the average person, but he decided not to let him know that his youngest daughter was also a mute. The young man sat in the parlor of their home and waited for the eldest daughter to come into the room so he could meet her. But she hadn't been in there more than 5 minutes when she began complaining about everything in regard to the poor man. He knew he couldn't take another moment with her and asked to meet the middle daughter. Within 5 minutes, her complaining had him convinced that he could never bring such a woman home to his family. Then the youngest daughter, the mute, stood in the doorway of the parlor and smiled. The man saw her and knew right away that he wanted her for his wife. Today, I'm going to talk about just how important the setting of your story is because with every story you will ever write, you first need to pick the place and then you need to choose a time. Then I'll tell you why the poor man chose the mute girl. When it comes to the setting of your story, it is so very essential to its creation, you simply can't build that story without first knowing where or when your story will take place. Let's first talk about the setting of place. Now, providing your story remains within the confines of your house, the setting of place remains your house. But if, for example, you decide to include in your story the journey each of your family members underwent to travel from their own homes to yours, then the setting of place must change to encompass the places they journeyed through. Now, depending on where in relation to your house they are traveling from, it wouldn't be beneficial to state each place that they encounter. Instead, you would group the setting of place by area. For example, if your house and their houses were all in the same city, then your setting of place would change to both your house as well as the name of that city. Unless something imperative to the development of your story needed to be stated at one of their houses or at some particular point along their journey to your house. Like if they stopped off at a gas station and something happened there to move the story forward, or a hotel where they needed to stay for the night, if something substantial were to happen there, it would be beneficial to make that place one of your settings. Furthermore, if their journey began outside of the country, then your setting of place would be grouped under the name of that country. And if any of your family were delayed, let's say at the airport, and something significant occurred there, then it would be beneficial to include that airport as one of your settings. But keep in mind, if your story takes place after all of your guests have arrived and your story only covers whatever happens inside your house, then unless you do a backstory or flashback of your guests recounting something vital that took place before they arrived, your setting of place would remain your house. As for the setting of time, being a Thanksgiving story, stating the year is most important. It drastically changes the scope of your story. And that's because a Thanksgiving dinner in 2021 is different than a Thanksgiving dinner in 1947 or 1847 or the very first Thanksgiving dinner ever held. The year your story is set in offers certain parameters that cannot be left out. For example, a typical scene for a Thanksgiving dinner in 2021 would probably look like this. The men gathered around the television watching the game, while the women were in the kitchen cooking the turkey in the oven, boiling potatoes on the stove, and warming up the biscuits in the microwave. The teenagers were sitting around on their cell phones watching the latest TikTok videos, while the younger kids were running around wreaking havoc on the furniture. You're probably used to seeing this at your family get togethers, teenagers on cell phones and kids jumping on furniture. Now, what if it took place in 1847? Instead of watching the game on a TV that hasn't yet been invented, the men would probably be out hunting the turkey that the women would then prepare over an outdoor stove. And the teenagers, well, with the absence of social media, they would be more inclined to interact with the rest of the family. There's a thought. This is the reason setting is so important to your story. It is a guideline by which you, the writer, needs to perform within the parameters of. But it is also the foundation from which your story grows from. A novel without the setting is like a river without the riverbed, hence, no river. All you have is a lot of water. Like I've said countless times before, without setting, there actually can be no story. It's important to understand that a story can't exist without its setting, no more than you or I can exist without being wherever you or I are right now, or were yesterday, or will be tomorrow. Any story that you will ever write must take place somewhere at some time. As a matter of fact, everything in existence must conform to this basic reality. Even you, as I just mentioned, must be somewhere right now, and your story is no different. To give you a better understanding of what I mean, let's say you decide to write a children's book about a little girl whose favorite bedtime character is a little dragon by the name of Drabbleton Dragon. Now, let's say Drabbleton escapes by flying out of an open bedroom window, and the little girl must now go on an adventure to find her friend and bring him back home. It's easy to imagine the sort of setting that this story would take place in. The writer would probably have it occur in a quiet, suburban neighborhood during the day with a warm sun to light the neighborhood. Butterflies and ladybugs and colorful birds all flying about. The grass would be green and the sky baby blue, while other children, similar to our little girl, would be laughing and playing games like hopscotch and kick the can. Hopscotch and kick the can. Okay, I know that they would probably be watching something animated on their tablet or playing a game on mom's cell phone, but for this example, I'm referring to a simpler time when children didn't need electronics to have fun. Anyway, let's suppose the writer was a sadistic psychopath. Instead of a setting filled with beautiful flowers and streets seemingly paved with love, it took place in occupied France in the wee hours. We would no longer expect to find pretty little houses of different colors because the backdrop would suddenly become destroyed buildings still smoldering from the last airstrike. The air would smell of sulfur. The trees and flowers would be scorched beyond recognition. And instead of laughing, the remaining children would be crying, huddled together inside one of the last remaining buildings. Then, as our dysfunctional writer, who's probably having a good time writing this, would send our little girl out in search of her friend. She had better be toting some sort of automatic weapon if she expects to make it more than a city block. And as for Drabbleton Dragon, well, cute and colorful would no longer be his image. In fact, at his young age, he had better already have the ability to breathe steel melting fire because if he can't charboil a few dozen Nazis, one of them would surely end up shooting him out of the sky. With just this one example, you can appreciate the importance of not just having a setting, but one that works with the story you are trying to create. Because without a setting, and furthermore, with the wrong setting, like in the scenario I've just given you, instead of sending children off to sleep with dreams of maybe owning their own little playful dragons someday, you will have instead filled their mind with such a horrifying impression of the world outside, they will go to sleep with the image of the little dragon plummeting to the earth, riddled with bullets seared into their psyche. A common mistake that you as a writer could make is simply not adhering to the parameters you set for your own setting and subsequently turn your readers against you. Always keep in mind, your story is a short break from reality for your readers. When they pick up your book and begin reading, they are trusting you to take them away from their usual existence and send them on a journey of wonder and imagination. What they don't appreciate is being let down. And a perfect example of letting your reader down is not being true to your setting. If you have your setting taking place in a school classroom back in the 1700s, then you cannot have students of 20, 30 in your story unless you have them time traveling back to the 1700s. But apart from doing a back to the future sort of story, you need to be authentic to the time period that you have selected. You might be thinking, well, it's fiction. It's all make believe. I decide if my student from 1685 has an iPhone to keep in contact with her mother or not. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Along those lines, you could even give her an iPad with AI capabilities that she usually sits at the back of her classroom and allows to write her essays for her. The problem is, although it's fiction and entirely up to you what you put into your story, unless it's a spoof on setting, which, by the way, could be quite an entertaining read, the entire concept of a girl that comes from a time before electricity calling her mom on an iPhone is too far fetched for the average reader to accept. You will have lost your credibility with your reader and alienated yourself from being someone to be taken seriously. It doesn't matter if it's made up fiction. Your readers know that, but they don't like their intelligence insulted, and taking an item like an iPad and giving it to one of your characters 800 years before it was invented without first setting up the believable possibility of it being there, like time traveling or spoofing, it creates a sense of incompetence on your part. Imagine yourself at a magic show. You know it's all tricks and ruses, but that's not important to you. You enjoy watching how the magician does it. Now, imagine while the magician is performing one of his biggest tricks, the one you had been looking forward to watching, he accidentally forgets to close the front flap of the box that his assistant is lying down in. As he begins, what would have looked like he was sawing her in half, but because she is so flexible, she is able to fold herself up into one compartment of the box. It is seen by all in attendance that he's cutting through nothing more than an empty compartment. The trick has been revealed, and although you knew that it was just a trick and she was never actually in danger of being sawed in half, having the curtain pulled back, like the Wizard of Oz, the entire experience has been ruined for you. You feel cheated and let down. You no longer have faith in that magician because he has inadvertently insulted your intelligence and you want your money back. Another example, you go to a fortune teller. Now, upon entering the establishment of Lady Karina, you see the sign at the side of the door that clearly states, for entertainment purpose only. You pay your money and take a seat across from Lady Karina. She takes your hands into hers and begins your reading. You smile and even chuckle a little as she begins to sway back and forth and then goes into a trance. She then begins to tell you things about your dead mother, things that she couldn't possibly have known. You are now taking her seriously and anxious to hear more about your mother, who you miss greatly. Lady Karina instructs you to return the following day because convening with the spirit of your mother is very draining. You return the following day with a greater payment, and after taking your seat at the table, wait for your mother to occupy the body of Lady Karina. Through her, you are able to communicate with your dead mother, and although part of you still believes it might be fake, there are just too many undeniable coincidences that have you believing that you have been speaking with your dead mother. This continues on for several weeks. Each time more is revealed about your mother, and although each time you arrive, you pass the sign at the door that clearly states, for entertainment purposes only. You are convinced that somehow, for you, it's real. Then one day, you are on your way to see Lady Karina when you bump into your childhood friend, the woman who first told you about Lady Karina. You get to talking, and she asks you if you ever made it over for your reading. You tell her you did and have been going there regularly. The woman then tells you to be careful because her mother has a knack for draining people of their life savings. Your mother? You ask. Yes. Didn't I tell you? No. The woman looks back at him a little confused. But even though I may have forgotten to tell you that she's my mother, didn't you recognize her? She was your mother's best friend right up until the day she died. That's how me and you grew up together. Lady Karina had created a setting so believable that you were pulled in, and it would have continued to provide you with a continuous supply of what you felt you needed to hear if the truth about her hadn't been revealed to you. In fiction, knowing that it isn't real is okay, but it's nice to believe in something other than the regular, mundane toils of life, if only for a short time, and a proper setting can most definitely provide that for a reader. And now, the ending to the story I call It's How She Said It. As the youngest daughter stood in the doorway, the young man wasn't just looking at her. He was actually reading the sign she had hanging around her neck. It read, "You deserve to know that I complain about everything and everyone just as much as my two older sisters. The difference is, because I'm a mute, you'll never have to hear it." They were wed the following month. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.